Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and I work on a Django application and let you learn with me as I work on my project. And I try and teach what I know about Django. I've been doing it for many years at this point, but sometimes we learn together because I don't know everything. So we're going to continue on my app that I'm building. It's a homeschool application that I'm doing for my family. And we're right in the middle of generating a bunch of views that are like going to be crucial to getting going with the site. So I've got GitHub up here, and we'll pick from one of these items that are left on this milestone that I've been working on, and that's kind of how we'll do things tonight. Before I get into that, though, if you want to keep up with me, I've got a link to my website up above at mattlehman.com, where you're free to subscribe, and I post on Python and Django stuff. I've also got presence on Twitter as MB Lehman. If you want to support me financially on Patreon, I'm MB Lehman there as well. Thank you to my current set of patrons. I appreciate all of you. Patrick, Mark, Rob, Ahmed, Eric. I think I got them all. Thank you for contributing. That's really awesome. Okay. So I think that's enough to get started. Oh, I guess a couple more things. There's a Discord below. So if you want to chat with me, you can find the link to the Discord below in the Twitch stream. And if you've got questions that are longer than a tweet, I'm happy to try and answer them there. I don't check it super often, but I do check it regularly enough that if there are things that you have questions about, I will do my best to try and answer them there. And finally, there's a chat for this stream. Please use it if you want. But keep it civil. Okay, so let's talk about what's next on my application and get you up to speed with where I'm at and where I got to last time. I don't actually even recall fully, to be honest, everything that I got done from last time. So we'll look at it for a moment and then talk about the pieces that I think I got done. And then we'll talk about the pieces that are still to do. So I've been working on this process of building out like the core CRUD interfaces. Oh boy, now I'm testing at somewhere.com, I think is the account that I use. I don't know why it's asking me to do this. Okay. I've been building out a portion of the application that is for the planning side of this. The application is all about managing dates for schools. And there's an execution phase that I outlined where during the week my wife will use the material that's presented in this weekly view to kind of say, here's what we're doing this week. And then when it comes time to plan out for the grades, I've got another set of views that is all going to be about data entry and setting everything up for the school year. And so that's what I've been building out. We worked on this view a couple of weeks ago where we added all this data for the school year. And last time we were working on an add course template, I believe, just kind of getting into a view. But most of those pieces are done at this stage. You can see the application starting to come together. It's got the state for when data exists. I've added buttons for adding new courses, so there's ways to expand upon the data. There's editing capabilities for the existing stuff. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good with where it's at, but there's still some things to do, and I'm using a milestone in GitHub to help drive towards what that is. So let's look at what's next. I've got 3 items left on this milestone, what I put into this milestone was all of the main interfaces that were going to be needed to add and edit the appropriate data for the school year. So we're down to the last parts, and before we get into the view that we're going to look at, let's talk briefly about the models as a reminder, so you can have a good understanding of where I'm coming from. So we'll open up the models PNG file here that is a generated file that I get from the Django extensions app, and it shows just the models that exist in the Django app. So we've got the school and school year, grade level, and course. Those are all the things that we've been adding, the ability to add grade levels, add courses. And there was already some user interface existing to add tasks that are the work that goes into courses. And now we need to shift gears. So all of that stuff is in place. That's the structure of the school year, everything about the course and the grade level that students will participate in. Now what I need to do is flip over to who is participating, the ability to create new students for users. It's not something that will be super commonly used. The way this application will be used is like, it's most likely going to be people's children. This is homeschool we're talking about. So you only need to add your kids once, presumably. So we will add a form to be able to add new students in case someone's brand new and they haven't added their students at all yet, their kids at all. And then I have an additional concept in the modeling. And let me see if I can find it. It's over here. It's this, I don't know how well you can read that, but it's the enrollment. And so the enrollment is a connection that says like, okay, all of the school years is defined over here, and the student is defined over here. How does the student get into that course, that grade level for the year, and get all of the courses assigned to them? And the way I'm tracking that is with an enrollment. It's a data model class that has a foreign key to a student and a foreign key to a grade level. So I need to be able to present a reasonable interface that shows like, hey, here are your students, and they're not enrolled for the school year yet. Where do you want to enroll them? Because you probably have different kids with different ages, presumably, unless you have twins, yada yada. But if you want to put them in different grade levels, here's your chance to do that. So let's tackle, since this is what we're going to be focusing on, let's tackle these two. And I don't know that we'll get all the way through them. It turns out to be quite a bit of work to get through all of the view and the template and the tests all in a single stream, but we'll do our best. But I want to focus specifically on getting the student view done first. And I want to spend a bit of time thinking about where are the buttons going to be for adding a student view. I haven't really talked this through yet with my spouse, who is going to be the customer for this application. So I'm going to try and pick what I think are the obvious spots. And then if there are better spots, she can help direct me there. And I also need to think of this with an eye for the onboarding process. That's another thing that we haven't done, but I don't know that it will get to all that. So I think tonight, I'm going to put it in the simple spot first and do the view and the template and tests and all of that. And then if we get through that, then we can start to consider where else should this go? How else should this be presented in a logical way? So the most natural place in my mind to add a student is in this students page. And this page is very Spartan, as you can see right now. And that's because there wasn't much purpose yet. Like when I initially created all this data for my spouse, I was doing web scraping and importing all the data from another tool. So my kids are already in here as students because I bypassed all of the input screens. So we need to have a button here. And so I think what I want to do is this input scores button should only appear when you have students. Otherwise, we should have an option to add students here, because you might have more students to add if you've got a kid that's starting kindergarten or whatever. And that's the button that I want to add. So let's do that. So I think the thing to start from is probably a template to add the button and then move into the view. So the template is on the students section, and this is the students index page, I believe. You can see it's got very little here. And so let's take this, the other link that's already here, and just to see what it looks like, I'm just going to refresh that. And so we should have two buttons, but they're right next to each other. And so we're going to use Tailwind to give us some space, some breathing room. And I'm going to do that by going to where I've got the padding and margin utilities. And I'll say that the margin on the left, and I think I've been using like 2 between buttons these days. I might change that in the future, but that's where we're going to start. And then we'll just change the actual text of the button to be what? add student. That seems right. And I'll format that consistently here. So if we refresh, whoops, I didn't get the margin right. So something happened. Could be, well, could be I just did it wrong. ML. Oh, I did left. I want right. ML. So so margin left is that side for me, that side for you. But we really want to have a right padding here. There. Now it's putting the margin between the buttons as what I would expect. Problem right now is that this button is not going anywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pattern that I like to do often, is kind of error-driven development. I don't think that's a phrase, but let's call it one. So EDD, we'll just make one up. Error-driven development. And the idea behind it is I know that Django is good about raising exceptions when things are wrong. So if we just add what I think it should be, then and then deep dive, go into there, and then fix the next thing, and add the next thing, and add the next thing, until we finally have a basic thing that passes, and then we can add the test and templates to flesh that out. It's a good way to learn. It also helps that I kind of know the patterns that our Django is going to expect. So these errors are not new to me, but they might be new to you. And if you've never seen them before, it's a good way to see what's going on and understand what things are complaining about. So the first thing I'm going to do is stare at a different URLs file for a minute to make sure I match my conventions. The way that I've been doing for create views is to use the create name. And so I want to say students create. That's the page that I'm going to want to see. So if I come back to here and I refresh, Django is helpfully telling me, hey, wait a minute, I don't have a create view to link to, so I don't know what you're talking about. That's not right. So our next job is to kind of dig into that and fill it out so that that should work. So we can go, and I'm going to steal this line from this create view, and we're going to go to the students URLs file. And we're going to add a create view here. And the index view is already using the root path, so we can't quite do that. That's okay. So I'll put in create slash, so it'll be students create slash, that'll be the view that we want to see. And we'll change this thing. And you can see that my Vim editor is already telling me what the next error is going to be. But I'll save it and show you what it looks like anyway from Django's point of view. It says that the views module has no course create view. Not surprising, because that is a different views file. And in fact, we don't need the template anymore. We're kind of done with that for the moment. So let's change this to a student, if I could spell, student create view. And it's still going to complain because that view still doesn't exist, but that's okay. So refresh. Now it's complaining about the student create view. We at least have the thing named appropriately. So let's go to the course views file because we're going to use a similar class view. And for the moment, I'm going to trim this way down. But for the moment, I'm just going to steal all of the stuff in this view. Most of it won't make sense. Most of it I'm going to delete. But I want to have like a whole picture of what that view is supposed to be. And so we'll go to the students view. And if I'm kind of keeping with the index create read pattern here, I'm going to put it right here. So let's go to here, and then we're going to rename this thing to the student create view. So it's going to complain about some imports that we're missing. We can reload and see that those things, we need those things. Let's go add the views that we need. And the views, there's a couple things we can do. So I learned recently this is me knowing Django for a long time, remind you, that you can import directly from generic. So see how I have template view here and it's importing from base? There's also an edit, details. There's a couple other modules that are kind of in there. But what Django does is it takes all of those things and re-exports them in the generic module. So what I should be able to do, this should work. Like if I save this, I mean, we're still going to get the create view error, but the template view import should still pass. And you can see that it does. So now we've simplified that to change that to generic to get the template view, and we'll add our create view. So that's good there. Now it should complain about the course view, or course form, excuse me. But we can, just for the moment, comment that out. And that dispatch is not going to execute, neither is a validation error. So frankly, that should work. It should at least bring up this page, I should say. When we try to click to the page, that's when we're going to get a different story, I think. Yeah. So now what's happening is the create view is trying to load a get request. And the way that that works is it goes first through dispatch. And I've got this custom code in here for dispatch for a case that we're not even going to talk about because it doesn't matter. But it's an exception that is not in this module scope. And I don't need any of this customization. So I'm just going to delete the dispatch method that's there. And we'll try refreshing again. And now it's telling us, now we're getting to the real meat of it. If you're working with a create views are one of the custom views that Django gives you to help quickly define the ability to create a new instance. And there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You can either do like it says here of adding a model and a query set and just letting that do the work, or you can create your own custom form to fill in. And when I was doing the course view, I needed a special form because I needed special validation for that. In fact, let's stare at it for just a second. Nope, that's the template. Course forms, there it is. So I needed this custom validation because it's a certain type of, it has certain data types that are special. You don't need to worry too much about it, but you can see that those things are there. For a student, I don't know that we're going to need a special form. The student has, okay, maybe I take that back. Because we need to save, well, let me think through this. We need to be able to save a student to a particular school. There's a foreign key to the school. And the reason I did that is to make sure there's an appropriate association so that the user cannot look at any other random user's students. So there has to be some kind of tie that binds a student to the user who's logged in. And that happens to be through the school, because the school, if you look at it, has a foreign key to an admin, and the admin is an instance of the user model. So we need to be able to put in a school when we submit the form, but we need to also then validate that the school is associated with the user. So I think there is going to be some validation here. And the best place to do that validation is in a form. So I think we need a form rather than just using the stock model and query set stuff that comes with there. Okay, so that means that what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this form class. We don't need any of this initial stuff. Delete that. And for the time being, well, I don't think, well, I know that we're going to want that piece of context, but we don't need the grade level. That's something else. So we'll keep the get context data, and this will go to, where should this go? Student detailed page is going to be really boring. So we probably want to send them to the student's index page. Because eventually in the future, the student's index page will actually show more than just that button. It'll show like who are your students collectively. So that's the reverse that we need. And we want to have a student form. It doesn't exist yet. What else? We could do... Maybe we could get away with not using a form. Let me think this through. Okay, so like I said, there's a validation that we need to do here. And that validation says that the user is associated with a school, the student is associated with a school that belongs to the user. Okay, so both of them point to the same school. And the way I was thinking about doing this was in the template providing the school ID. And that's possible. But the other way we could do this, handle this, is with the form keyword arguments. So the form keyword arguments are things that get injected when the form is created. And I don't know if we could just provide the school year there, or I'm sorry, the school there, and it would do the right thing, or if we'd have to add custom validation. So why don't we try it? Let's just try it and see what happens. And if it works, cool. I'll have learned something new. Because the nice part about this is it would mean one less class to go read, one less chunk of extra validation somewhere to go read. It'll just be a nicer pattern. And we already have access to certain things. There's all sorts of nice qualities here. So I'm going to delete all this code that's here because none of that's necessary. And I'm going to add to the keyword arguments. I'm going to add, what am I going to add here? I'm going to be naive about it for the moment, but I think I'm going to add the school like this and say self request user school, because I have a property that is on my user model to get access to the school. And one of the constraints of my system is that a user will always have a school. So this should always pass. That I think will allow us to get rid of a student form, but we're still going to have an error if we're trying to refresh. And we're going to have that error because it's expecting the a model on there. So we can say, what can we say? That the model for this create view needs to be a student. And I haven't even imported that yet, so let's do that now. That's in the student app. All right. Refresh. Oh, you got to list fields. I forgot about that. Okay, because we're saying that the model is a student and we're not providing a form, you have to tell Django which fields you care about. And the fields that we care about are the fields that are in my model. And UUID can be generated by default, so we don't need that one. So we need to provide school, first name, and last name. So we can do that with a tuple. We can say school, first name, and last name. All right, let's try it again. Aha. Okay, init got an unexpected keyword argument school. So this is what I sort of anticipated. So what I'm hoping that we can do is figure out what data we can provide. So I think what I can do is give it some initial. So initial is like data that if you provide that particular data, it will inject that into the form. So okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Create view is making a form on the fly from your model from the combination of the model you tell it and the fields you provide it. And all of the rest of these methods are in support of that form that's being created on the fly. So all of this is trying to avoid the need to make a custom form. So there are other methods that we can use here. Get form keyword arguments is probably the wrong one. So what I really want is, I think, initial. So I'm going to go to a certain website called Class-Based Views, which just is a good place to read up on the different views and what the method are available on them. And I think one of them is get initial, which is a dictionary that you can provide. So if I give it the initial that includes the school, then I think that will be part of the data so when we submit the form, it should have that data too. So instead of this, actually, let's comment that out for a moment. We would do def get initial and give it self, and then we return a dictionary with school, and it's going to be self request user school. Now, how's that going to do? Okay, cool. This is not the right form, clearly. This is for the course. We haven't changed the template yet. But I think that we have enough to go on to actually switch over and not do the template part and write some tests and see if this is behaving in the way I expect it to with this initial data stuff, or if it's not. Yeah, that's because I'm hoping that what happens is that on the post, that initial data will be added every time, and then the data from the submission will be added, and then Django will merge those two things together to produce the final data that gets to be the validation of whether you're actually creating a student or not. If that doesn't work out in practice, what will really happen is on the post, I'll get some kind of failure because I wasn't providing the school. So this is the hope. I'm banking on getting initial doing some extra stuff for us, and I think it will, but I'm not 100% confident of that. So we're going to go now to the students test views file, and we've got the index view here, and we're going to use this as a template for our view that we're about to do. And instead of index, we'll change it to create. So there's that, and then we'll we also need to change the capitalization. I don't know, there's probably a way in Vim that I can make it do mixed case stuff properly, but I don't know it. So now we've got a new test case, and it's got a couple of tests that I basically create on all of my tests. One is, essentially every time you go into the application and do anything in the app, you need to be logged in. Everything about this app, there's going to eventually be like a very thin marketing page, assuming that I actually get this in front of a bunch of other users. But there's not a lot I can do for you unless you're logged in and you're in your school. So I check that you're logged in. That's this first test. We'll check that. And oops, I didn't save it, so PyTest was like, "What are you talking about?" And that test passed. And that test passed because I included the login required mixin. I add that to all of my class-based views, and it just makes sure that an anonymous user is not able to get into the app. The other thing that we're going to test is that this 200 request works, and we should know that works already because we kept doing this cycle of error-driven development, as I called it, until we got this view. Now, what this test does not check is the content of that view. So notice that all it's checking here is, did you get a 200 OK response? This is why unit tests are good, but they don't tell the whole story. We have a passing test, but this is certainly not the right template. And if I left it at that, I'd clearly be doing a very bad job. Okay, so we're going to now test the other side of this, test the ability to create a post. So we need to do a new test, and I'm going to test post. And it'll be a user, because we always need a user. In fact, let's do this, steal that block, because we'll need it. And we need a post here. And the post is going to return a response object. And I want to check that the response is a 302 response. It's going to do a redirect. That's what a 302 is. So we say, we pass it the response. And that much right now should fail, because we haven't provided any data yet. So it's trying to render something right now to us, and it's just not right. So what's missing here, importantly, is a data that is going to go along with the post. And here's where I'm banking on initial doing something for us. So let's say that the new student's name is going to be, I don't know, Johnny Smith, because I'm not being very creative tonight. So that's the data, and we'll pass that data into the post. Shoot. Okay. So clearly something didn't work right. Here's where we need to get a little bit more creative. I need to figure out why didn't it work? What was it missing? So one way I've thought of doing this is to get out, now on this create view, it's going to add a form. Like I said, it's automatically generating a form, and it adds it to the context as a form. I'm using Django Test Plus, and so we should be able to get that form by saying self get context, and the key in the context name is going to be form, or it should be. And then I'm going to do the silly thing, because it's fast, and I'm going to print the form errors. And I suspect at this point it's going to say you didn't provide a school. Yep. School, this field is required. Sad. Okay. So what am I missing? Is there another way we could do this? Like I said, I do know how to do this with another tool. We could create a form, but that just seems so heavy-handed. It seems like this should be possible to add to the form without needing to include it in the template, and without needing to do extra validation checking. Because as you can see here, like this would be 2 lines, but this didn't work. It needs something else. So let's look back at the class-based views and see if we can make sense of this. And we might need to dig into the Django source and see if it's even possible to do what I'm hoping to do. Oh, another way we might be able to do this is in the form keyword arguments. I have an idea. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. I'm looking for other obvious ways that we might be able to handle this. And I'm not seeing any from this list of options. Okay, we're going to go with option 2. And option 2 is to do this. We're going to say the form keyword arguments. Instead of doing school here, the other thing that to make a bound form, you can pass in data. And so if we can say if data is in keyword arguments, because there's if it's on a GET request, it's not going to have any data. But if it's on a post, the superclass may already have a data dictionary from whatever was passed in the request. And so here's now our chance to say, to override it and say data school is equal to this. So if this works correctly, it is a way to override no matter what the user sends. So let's say we have some malicious user that's trying to add new students to some other random user's account, and they're doing that by sending along a school. Well, this method right here says, I don't care what you have as a school, I'm overriding it with what is right here. So now I'm going to test the post. Query dict instance is immutable. Shoot. So, okay, what is this? The data that's going into the form is coming straight from the request post. I'm trying to think if I want to get really kind of slimy about this. Maybe I am, because it seems convenient. I don't mean slimy in like a nasty way, but just it's not the right way to probably treat this. So this this thing right here, keyword args data, is not just a dictionary. It's actually whatever they call it, a keyword. Well, now I'm blanking out. What was the name of that thing? Keyword dict or something? A query dict. A query dict right there. So I can tell you with near certainty that this keyword args data thing is equal to the request post. Okay. And the request post, that's the thing that says it's immutable. It doesn't want to be changed. So that's what immutable means if you aren't familiar with it. It's a kind of a computer science jargony term. Immutable equals not changing. And if you know English, you can probably deduce that, but sometimes it helps to see it spelled out. So they do this for interesting reasons, that I guess. Maybe the easiest way that we could change this is by replacing the query dict. And so there's another, I was about to say like the slimy thing that I could do is I could change the actual data type to use a private attribute called _mutable that exists on the query dict that I happen to know because I've read the source code, and you can switch it from true to false or false to true, whichever direction it needs to go, and then you can start to set attributes on it. But I don't think that's the recommended way to do it. I think instead what they want you to do is to say take a copy of it. So let's take it as like this, and we'll say .copy, and then we can fill in data. Actually, let's do it here. Data school, like this. So that will add that. And then, so the funny part about this immutable thing is like, they don't care if you overwrite the whole where this thing is stored. So then we can take keyword arg data and replace it with our copy. So it's the same. It's effectively the same thing as what we're trying to do, but it gets around that mutability problem that we just saw. So if you ever encounter a query dict being immutable, you can do copies on it. And I think, hopefully, what's going on here? Oh, okay, so that actually worked. So now what's happening is we're getting a redirect, but I'm trying to print out some form that's not there in the redirect. So I think this should pass. Awesome. That's really good, because I think what that's going to do is save us from extra classes. And maybe there's a future where I do need a student form to do custom validation on the student, but that day is not today. So I'm not going to write a bunch of extra code for things that I don't need. All right. The other thing I'm trying to decide is how much more I want to test this. Oh, okay. I know I need to test a couple things. Eventually, this template that we're going to use is going to be used for editing too. Like if someone typed in the first name or last name wrong, they should be able to change it. That should be allowed. And the way that I've been dealing with that is I've been using a shared template between the create view and the edit view, because for most of my models, that's the same thing. or roughly the same thing. And I've been using an extra Boolean that I add to the context of this create in order to say which mode the template should be in. It's kind of two states, but and one could argue that you should just have two separate templates, and that's okay, but I'm choosing to have a single template because so much is common. So I want to do one thing here, and I want to assert that the context for create. And so create should come back as true, and that should pass, so that test should still pass. The other thing I want to do is I want to assert where the redirect is going to. And the way to do that is to say assert self reverse students index is in the response location. Location is the header that tells where a redirect should go. So if the path from that reverse call is in the header for the redirect, then we can be sure that the get success URL is going where I want to go. So it's just kind of testing that the contract for where I'm sending things is accurate. And I didn't save that, so we didn't actually test it. Okay, now we've tested it. Finally, the last thing I want to test here is that we get a student created out of this. So we want to check a student. So I'm going to do this by saying student objects get, and then school equal user school. This is kind of a weird way to use get a little bit, because a get is supposed to return a single instance, but because my tests are clearing out all the data, there should only be one record. And so it's actually a way to assert that I'm getting one and exactly one student. I need to import the model from the right place. So let's import the student model. And we're going to come down here and we're going to assert that the student's first name is equal to Johnny. And we'll assert that the last name is equal to Smith. That gives me basically complete confidence that the view code is doing what I want it to do. That doesn't mean that the template is right. It doesn't mean that the template is going to honor the contract that's expected here. A lot of that is baked into this assumption right here. This data dictionary that I'm putting together for this test, that's what the template has to provide. The template has to provide two inputs, a first name and a last name. Not crazy hard to do, but the current template is something totally different. So we need to go fix that. The other thing I want to do is run this under the coverage tool that I have and check that we're covering all of these lines. I think we are, but just to be certain. Okay, got full coverage there. That's great. And I think we're ready to move on to adding the template. Let's come back to the students create view, and we're going to change this to be students, and we'll change course to be student form. And now if we come back over to this page and refresh, we're going to get a template error. Template doesn't exist. So we can set aside the Python code for a little bit, and now we're going to switch into template mode. Let's go to the course form that we were using just a moment ago for the course, and I'm going to copy it all because it's very similar to what we're going to need for this student view. I'm going to navigate to the students directory where that stuff is, and we'll say student form HTML, and we'll paste in all the content. And I'm going to change this instance of course to student. And what else should I change here? There's another one. There's another one. Because I'm just updating the buttons right now. And if we do this, we can refresh, and it's starting to look like the right thing. It says add student, but it clearly has got other stuff in here. That's not correct. So we can start to take out the other chunks that have nothing to do with this. So we can take out all of the stuff related to grade level, displaying grade levels, which I think is this much. Yep. So there's that chunk out. You can take out all of the stuff related to the days of the week. That's something else. And then now we've got it all. I guess the whole thing is, what, 50 lines? Yep, 50 lines of template. And we need to change some context here. Like, we've still got course on this. Let me check one thing in the model first. Full name, that's what I called it. So I'm going to want to display eventually the user's full name in certain areas. Like in this part of the template that you can see here, this is for the title. It's actually not very visible on my stream. I can drag the window down a little bit. So this area, hopefully you can see that right there. It says add student right now, but when in the edit template version of this, we're going to have it display the student's name there. And so that's what I'm coming over here to do. So I'm going to change course to student because that's going to be the name that's in the context for all of these bits. We'll set that aside for a moment. And this name is going to be the full name property, which should give the first and the last name. Same here. Full name. That way when we get to the edit view, we'll see the appropriate thing. In fact, we might be wanting to change that. I don't know. Edit? I'll leave it as it is for now to keep it consistent. Okay, so let's walk through the template to see what the pieces are. There are non-field errors. Those are things that are validation errors that aren't related to specific fields like first name or last name. I don't think that we'll actually have any of these with this class, but I'm leaving it as a kind of a catch-all in case there's things I'm not thinking about. That's good to have it in there. We have a form tag with a CSRF token, and there's the name here. So we need to change name to be first name. And I'm going to change ID to be ID first name. Okay. The thing that we must critically get correct is this attribute right here of the name on the input. If we don't get that correct, it won't be submitted with the form. And so our data contract between what the Python code expects and what HTML is doing will be wrong. And so that's critical. And by the way, I'm pretty deep into building my own forms here. I do that because of Tailwind, frankly. In order to get the styling that I want and have things be customized to the level I want, I need to build up my own inputs. Django totally has the ability to say, I mean, all of this stuff that's here, I could replace it with something like form, and Django would render that in a way that is perfectly adequate. And if you could add the proper CSS styling, you could have a fine form that is way faster to do than what I'm doing. Because of how I used to use Tailwind, it means that I don't get that benefit. I'm almost reaching the point where it makes sense to extract some of these common elements like text inputs and stuff into a common pattern. So because I'm starting to change these things, the same things over and over again, and that's going to it will bite me in the future if I continue on that path and just have dozens and dozens of forms that all follow this kind of stuff. Because the moment that I want to restyle that thing, I have to edit the whole world. So I'm kind of ignoring that for now, frankly. But I think that's okay. Because making it generic, unless you know exactly what you're doing and the format that you want that in, it may not give you what there's more little variations here than you might anticipate. For example, like I've got autofocus on this particular input, and I do that as a way to allow someone who's coming to this form to just start right off without having to click on anything. They get their cursor pulled right to the right spot so they can start typing and type, hit enter. That's the goal. But if I extracted all of this widget or this input into some kind of widget template, then I'd have to have autofocus as some sort of parameter that I would pass in. And you can start to see like the things that you have to add and consider when you try and generalize things. Not saying you shouldn't, but those are just things that need to be thought through. Okay. What's next? So we've got the first name field, and I believe that all is good. I'm going to add a second one, and we'll change first name to last name. I think that's it. Let's delete the autofocus because that will be a second field. It won't make any sense. And change the label on it to last name. Let's see how it looks, or if it loads properly. There's still some other stuff in here that's not right. We're in this create mode. It's linking to the wrong place, so we do need to. So the form looks right now to me. It's got a place to add first name and last name. That's all good. This button is probably going to the right place and would then redirect back properly. This cancel is not going to the right place, and the edit view is not going to the right place. So we need to change those. So when it's in create, I don't want to send it to this current school year page. I want to send it to the students index page. That's where you're going to go if you cancel. And if you're in the edit, like this would have blown up if we were in the edit view. We want to go to a page that doesn't exist yet, frankly. So I'm going to say, fix me. Point to the edit page. So it's okay for now, and we'll just let it blow up when it's time. And I think the rest of this is right. So we're going to try this out and see if it adds a student. The way I'm going to do that is by bringing up the Django admin, because I don't have a place to display it yet. So we'll come down to where the students are in the system. And you can see we've got 2 students. They're my kids. So we'll add our Johnny Smith example. Johnny Smith, and this test should basically be identical to that post test that we saw, the actual unit test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the network tab so we can watch it and see, like, inspect the data. So I'm persisting the logs so that it will store that request. We can then look at what was actually sent, and then we can go over to the site admin and make sure that's all matches up. So it seemed to succeed. We did a post, we got a 302, and then it sent us back to the student's index page, and then it loaded all the stuff that's here. I don't know why we got a 302 on the style sheet. That's curious. I need to check that out. Fascinating. Original and decoded. What in the world? Okay. And if we look at the post, we can see the parameters that we sent it. So it included a CSRF token. It included the first name and last name. So the CSRF token, middleware token, that's for CSRF protection. That's cross-site request forgery. It's a security protection that Django includes. So that's always there, whether your forms are dealing with that, whether you know your forms are dealing with that or not. It needs to be there in order for a form submission to work. So it sent those two things as the data that we added. And then if I refresh over here, we've got Johnny Smith. If I click on him, we can see he's got a UUID and he's connected to the school for this account, this user account that we're checking. So I think that worked. I think that's everything we need. Let's look at the student issue and see if we got it all. We link to the students page. We have the first and last name, and we connected to the school. I don't think there's anything else really to add. Although I'm wanting to create a new issue now. Like I said, we had to come over to the Django admin in order to see everything, and that's no good. So let's come back to the milestone, and let's say new issue, display students on students index page. Show the list of students. And I don't know what I want that user interface to look like right now. It might look similar to the course interface that I have of like a little card. Just kind of list out who is there. I'm not sure yet. But I want to track it because that's going to be something important. Because there's going to be other actions that are associated with students, like enrolling or stuff like that. And we might need a variety of links to that. Okay. So we have a template, we have a view, we have tests, we have URLs. I think that's like the whole life cycle for adding a view. And that's kind of the mode I'm in right now. This is not glamorous Django. There's nothing wild and eccentric about anything that I'm doing. It's just cranking through views. We talked through a bunch of things about this, I think. The tests that I added are not testing a lot of conditions. I'm testing, can you log in? Can you get to the page? Can you post to the page to create a new user? That's about as few tests as you could want. I needed to add it to the URLs to give it a place for the links to go. And then we have our view itself, which is based off of a create view, and we're using the student model. So we need to provide a template, we provide the fields that we care about, and we're doing this this is probably the most clever bit of this whole chunk of coding that I did, of checking if data is already in the form keyword arguments, doing a copy and setting the value, and then resetting the data so that we get exactly the user that we care about. I suppose I could write a test that tries to add in a bad school, like a different school, but I just don't care that much. I'm really feel really confident in that code. I know that code's getting hit, and I understand what this is doing, and that's just not going to add value in my life to add that there. So here's the link in the template to on the index page, and here's our full template. To finish it off, let's do one last run of coverage. Come on now, why are you not exiting? Make sure we still have all of those lines covered, and I think then we'll wrap it up for the night. Cool. And that gives us a nice little bow on the top of this whole thing. We'll say add a student form, or add a student. It's frankly a page. It's a view and a template. It's the whole thing. So add the add student. Page. And this fixes issue, what was it? 82. We commit that and we push it up to GitHub. Great. I think I'm going to call it there. I think it's a good stopping place. It covers the whole spectrum of building out a view. I hope you learned something tonight. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask them on Twitter if it's kind of short and I can reply there. If not, reminder that there's a Discord link below. You can join the Discord, ask questions to me there, where if we need to get into more depth about something. I do take these videos or these streams and I post them up on YouTube. So if you want to refer back to something, see something I did, if I skipped over something, and I know we were quiet here today, so people might have been doing other things, and that's cool. But for those that want to catch up on more information about that stuff all goes on YouTube. You can follow me here on Twitch. You can follow me on YouTube if you want to subscribe over there and find out when I'm posting videos. I'm pretty regular about posting streams the following day usually. I try and write up show notes that are on my site at mattlehman.com, so you can catch up with there as well. So I think that's all I've got for this evening. Hope you learned something, and thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.